Good morning. Today we have our hot shop team down on the floor at the center bench. They're going to be working on creating some large or oversized beads. And the way that they're going to be applying color today is through something called cane. And cane are these little sticks of colored glass that I have in my hand here. They can come in any color, and they're also going to alter the design after getting the cane on the outside of the bubble. And for those of you who haven't been here before, I can give you a quick little rundown. So everything we do in here starts in our furnaces. Our furnaces are the large tanks with the closed doors, and we have two of them, one on the left and one on the right of the hot shop. And they hold 1,000 pounds of molten glass at 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. And when this glass is molten, it's very viscous and sticky like honey. So we stick our pipe into the glass, and when we turn, it gathers up a nice ball on the end. And from there, we can blow into it, and it'll blow out much like a balloon. So you see that this pipe right here is hollow, and they have blown into it. But we need to make sure to keep our glass nice and hot to continue working with it, so that's where our glory holes come into play. Those are the open face furnaces throughout the hot shop behind me that you see. And we have multiple of them running at the same time just so that we can work on multiple parts of our project at the same time. They all run at around 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. So over on that right bench, we have Nick, who has a large plate. And this plate has little ridges that can hold these little sticks of colored glass called cane. And so once they have the size of bubble that they need, they're going to heat up that cane, as Nick is doing right now, heating it up just enough so that it wants to stick to the glass, but so it doesn't stick to itself or to the plate. And so that right there is also a pipe cooler, so every now and then the heat starts to travel towards the glass blower's hands, so they need to make sure to keep that pipe nice and cool. So now that they've heated that cane up, Gabe is going to come over with his clear glass bubble, and he simply presses down and rolls, and that cane sticks to the outside of that bubble. And this is giving the glass perfect lines or ridges of color. And then from there, they're going to be able to create these little cups, kind of about this size here, maybe a little bigger, and then they're going to be able to turn these into individual beads later on. And if you're wondering how we get cane in the first place, I actually have an interesting video that can show you how we create cane. So can I have that cane pulling video, please? So up on screen, there's going to be a silent video where they are pulling cane. So I'm going to describe as they go along. They start with a large amount of color, and then they gather layers of clear over top of it, connect a secondary pipe to the other side of that glass, and then they can stretch this glass across the entirety of the front of our hot shop. So whenever we pull this cane, you'll see we have all of these wooden ladders laid out on the floor like you'll see in the video. And they just go ahead and they pull it across the length of the room, set it down on the wooden ladder so that it doesn't break due to cold shock from touching the hard concrete. And then they can chop it up into whatever size pieces they need to roll on the outside of a bubble. So now that Gabe has gotten that glass nice and hot, he's going in with this wooden spoon-shaped tool called a block. This block is usually made out of a fruit wood, which is a little bit harder, and dipped in water to resist burning. And this is just being used to shape the glass before he blows it out a little bit. Then he's going in with a stack of wet newspapers, and this is one of the only flexible tools in our hot shop, so this is a very helpful tool. To stretch this bubble even more, you could see Gabe is hanging it over the edge of this workbench. Now Gabe is going in with a pair of jacks, which are those two metal blades, and he's creating a divot in the glass, which is going to get rid of the imperfect end. And he's also making sure that when he's tightening this line in the glass, that he's not squeezing it all the way shut. So when he breaks it off, he's going to have an opening in the end of this piece. So then he's going in with a pair of diamonds, then a little tap, and that ball on the end is knocked off. Now from here, they're going to be able to create their first little cup. So Gabe is going in with those jacks again, and he's using them to open up the inside of the piece through that small hole that he had previously created. Then he's going to make another divot, much like that first one, being sure not to close off the hole, just like last time as well. And now you can see he has this small cup shape on the end of this piece. And so Nick is going to come over with a little pronged fork, and he's going to gently pick that up off the end. And this will be set aside for later on, where they can attach it to a secondary pipe and blow it out into a bead. But for now, it's going to be set inside of this big silver box right here called the garage. And that's going to keep it nice and warm at around 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And welcome to those who just joined us. Today we have our hot shop team down on the floor. They're working on this. They're working at the center bench, creating these large or oversized beads, probably about like this big. And these beads are going to have a pattern of cane inside of them. Cane is these little sticks of colored glass. So you might be able to see the perfect lines of color going throughout the entire piece. And that was achieved through cane, which I can explain in a moment. But right now, they're creating these little cups about this big off of the end of this piece over and over again. So you can see Gabe is going in right now with a pair of jacks, which are the two blades, and he's creating a divot in that glass called a jack line. He's making sure not to close that line off completely so that the air can still go all the way through. And then Nick is coming over with this little pronged fork, and he gently picks it up off the end of this piece. And then it's carried over to this big silver box right here called the garage. And that's going to keep them warm at around 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So later on, they're going to grab another pipe, come over and grab that piece out of that box. And then they're going to be able to create an individual bead out of that. And now to explain the cane and how they got those perfect lines of color, can I have that cane pulling video, please? So up on screen, there's going to be a silent video explaining how they get this cane. They start with a large amount of color on the end of a pipe, and they gather clear over it a couple of times, and then they shape this into a cylinder, attach another pipe to the end of this glass, and then they can stretch it across the entirety of the front of our hot shop. And when they're pulling this cane, they want to make sure that that hot glass isn't touching the cold, hard ground. So they've got all of these wooden ladders laid out on the floor in the video. If it were to touch the floor, it would create something called thermal shock, which would cause cracking. And then they can break this cane up into whatever size piece they need to roll up on the outside of a piece. And this is how they rolled it up on the outside of this bubble here. So they come over with a clear bubble, and then once they've heated that cane just enough, it sticks together like glue. And then from there, they can shape the bubble to whatever they need. And in this case, it was just a very elongated shape. And I just want to remind you, if anyone ever has any questions, please just raise your hand and I'll come right over. So these beads that they're creating today, you haven't seen them yet, but they're a commission. So we have a female artist who has asked our hot shop team to make these large beads today. So that's their purpose. They're going to be used in an art project in the future. Now, for those of you who are new to our hot shop, since there's a lot of new faces in here, I'm going to give a little bit of a rundown of the hot shop so you can understand what's going on in here. So everything we do in here starts in our furnaces. Our furnaces are the large tanks with the closed doors, and we have one on the left and on the right of the hot shop. And they hold 1,000 pounds of molten glass at 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. And when this glass is molten, it's very viscous and sticky, like honey. So we stick our pipe into the glass, and when we turn, it clings onto the end and forms a ball. And from there, we can blow into it. It'll blow out much like a balloon, or we can use it in a solid manner called sculpting. And we need to make sure to keep our glass nice and hot, so that's where our glory holes come into play. And these are the open face furnaces throughout the hot shop behind me. These all run at around 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. And we just have multiple of them running at the same time today, just so that we can work on multiple parts of the same project. It is artistic. So there was a there was an architect that came from California, I was told, and he was trying to find something that screamed Pacific Northwest, and he saw the pine trees, and so he created a cone shape. So this one is our furnace, and it has the molten glass in there. So when you open the door, there's a pool of molten glass sitting inside of it. So that's where they get the glass. They gather there, but they have to make sure to keep it hot to continue working with it. So that's why we have two different furnaces. And actually, fun fact, the furnace that holds our molten glass has to run 24/7 because if it were to fully cool down, it would take 3 whole days to come back up to temperature. So now with the remaining color that they had at the pipe at the center bench, Nick has brought it over to the right bench, and he's going to start on the very first bead. So welcome to everyone who recently joined. Today we have our hot shop team and they are working on creating these large or oversized beads. They're getting started on the first one on that right bench. They were doing a lot of prep work before you got in here. So over on the right you can see Nick is sitting down at the bench and he has a little cup shape on the end of this hollow tube. And actually, to get the color and pattern on this glass, they started with something called cane, which are little sticks of colored glass. And I have a video that can give a short explanation of how they get this cane. So can I have that cane pulling video, please? Thank you. So to start off, they have a large amount of color on the end of a pipe, and they gather multiple layers of clear over top of this. And then they shape this glass into a cylinder and attach a secondary rod to the end of that cylinder. And from there, they simply stretch this glass across the entirety of the front of our hot shop, as they are in this video. And you'll notice they have all of these little wooden ladders down on the floor. This is to prevent that hot glass from becoming thermally shocked from touching that cold concrete. They have a little barrier. And then they can chop this cane up into small pieces that will later on be rolled onto the outside of a bubble. And right here you'll see they prepare a bubble and then roll it over top of that cane. They heat up the cane and heat up the bubble, and then it sticks together like glue. So this is how they got those perfect colored stripes in our glass today. And now at the center bench, you can see Gabe has brought over a hot bit of clear glass. This has been touched down on the outside of this little cup shape. And this is going to be flattened using 2 paddles, creating a 90-degree angle. This is creating a disc shape for this bead. Now they have to remove this bead from its original pipe in order to finish off the other side of this piece. So Gabe is coming over with a disc of hot clear glass. It's being touched down on the end of the bead, and when they pull out, you can see there's a little bit of an air bubble because this has blocked off the end of this bead completely, and now they can go ahead and pop it off of its original pipe. And I just want to remind everyone, if anyone ever has any questions, please just raise your hand and I will come right over. So after heating up the second end of this piece, they trim off the extra color, and then they're going to be able to square this off like the other end, creating a perfect disc shape. And for those of you who haven't been here before, I'm going to give just a little bit of a rundown so that you can understand the temperatures and where we get things from in the hot shop. So everything we do in here starts in our furnaces. And our furnaces are the large tanks with the closed doors. And we have two of them, one on the left and one on the right of the hot shop. And they hold 1,000 pounds of molten glass at 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. And when this glass is molten, it's very viscous and sticky like honey. So we stick our pipe into the glass, and when we turn, it gathers up a ball on the end. And from there, we can blow into it. It'll blow out much like a balloon, or we can use it in a solid manner called sculpting. And we need to make sure to keep our glass nice and hot, so that's where our glory holes come into play. And these are the open face furnaces throughout the hot shop behind me, and they all run at around 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. So just a little bit hotter than that molten glass. And we have multiple of them running at the same time, you'll notice. This is just so that we can work on multiple parts of the same project at the same time. So after they've knocked that bead off of its secondary pipe, they're going in with a small hot torch. And this torch, fun fact, runs at around 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's over double the heat of our molten glass, the hottest item in our hot shop. That's being torched to get the sharp ends off of it, and then being carried over to the annealer, which is that big black box on the wall over there. And this is going to very slowly cool our piece down so that it doesn't break due to thermal shock. If we were to take a fresh piece and just leave it on the floor, it would start breaking in a matter of seconds to minutes. And then the process starts all over again with another bead in another cup. Can I have a view of the right bench, please? So at that center bench, they have started with that cup shape once more. And if you are wondering, we are getting all of this color from this big silver box right here called the garage, which is keeping it nice and warm at around 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So inside of this box, we have these little cups about this size and shape with a hole in the end, kind of sitting, waiting for us to pick them up. And then we pick them up on the end of a hollow pipe, and we can take them out and form them into this cup shape that they have at the center bench here. So here in Tacoma, we have a local nonprofit organization called Hilltop Artists, and this is a program where youth can learn how to blow glass from 6th grade through high school and a little bit beyond too. And I have a video that can talk a little bit more about this program. I just thought it would be interesting because we have a lot of youth in our audience today. So can I have that Hilltop Artist overview video, please?
Oftentimes people come into the program, they look at 12-year-olds blowing glass and they're like, who thought this was a good idea? But if you set the expectation high for these kids, so many of them will reach that expectation and go beyond.
The Hilltop Artist program for glass blowing gives you something to look forward to at the end of the day.
Being involved in arts has really helped me stay focused because I really connected with it and I like it.
We've learned a lot of stuff, most of the stuff I make in here, like cups and bowls, I can use at home, and I've never been able to do that before.
What we do in working in the glass world is a very small community of people. But I think one of the things that this place does is it shows you that there's a larger, role that you can play in the community.
Before I took this glassblowing course, I did not consider myself an artist. I didn't think I was an artist. I didn't like the arts. I thought it was kind of phony. But coming into this class, I really learned how to express myself, and I was able to create things that I truly thought were beautiful. Just from my first gather, I knew it was something that I wanted to identify with and do whatever it takes to continue doing that for the rest of my life.
The program just goes kind of a step beyond what most programs do. Yes, we're an art program teaching 21st century skills in a school environment, but then we're also connecting these kids to all the social programs that they need.
Last year I was going through some stuff and I came here and I felt secure. Art has always been kind of my way of coping through everything, and glassblowing is like everything to me now. So
a lot of the students that I work with, the population that I work with, it's a big deal for them to even come to school, to show up to school.
As much as we use glass to hook the kids and to get the kids to come up in here every day, that's not really why we're here. Our goal isn't to turn all of these students into glass artists and populate the world with more glass art, but it's to make them better citizens and hopefully find something in themselves that they didn't see before.
So I started the program when I was 12. Growing up, it was really hard. I went through a lot, and glass was always my go-to. This is my home. It's my family. Being that struggling kid, and then now being on the other side and being able to be there for the kids, it's a really cool feeling.
We've become sort of a family in here, and we help them through that tough time of being 12 up to 19 years old. So
It's a really friendly place. All the teachers really nice. It's like another family that you can have.
I think it's made me a better person because I'm excited to go to school.
Feeling like they're creative is an important skill, I think, these days, in order to, with the changing world and the economy and everything the way it is, to be able to constantly, create a problem solver, reinvent yourself. I think that's what art does, and I think it's one of the wonderful skills that it provides these kids. Within a couple of weeks, they're making these beautiful objects that they take home, and their family and their friends see them and are oohing and eyeing and wondering, like, you made that? How did you even do that? That's amazing. So suddenly there's this pride in what they're doing, and they've overcome this fear of the heat and the kind of the intimidation factor of the glass blowing, and now they're actually creating things. And then as they stay involved with the program, they get to pass those skills on to their friends, show their friends what they know, mentor, and all those things. And so you can turn kids on to going to college. You can turn kids on to education in a way that they never thought was possible before. And I think that's the future that these kids have.
Welcome to anyone who may have recently joined. Today we have our hot shop team down on the floor. These guys are our full-time hot shop staff, and they're working on a commission to make these large, oversized beads. And these beads end up being kind of a disc shape, so they have these 90-degree angles on the sides where the openings are. And so you can see at the center bench, they're working on finishing another one of these large beads. And to finish off and mirror the other side of this piece, you can see they're using two tools to create a 90-degree angle on that edge. This is creating a nice crisp edge as that glass gets pushed into that corner. And this is really interesting. To knock these beads off of the secondary pipe, they go in with a little butter knife and they hit that connection point to create all of these very small fractures and cracks. And then when they send shock through the pipe, it travels down and breaks exactly where they want it to. And then they use this little hot torch here to torch off any sharp remaining edges. And a little fun fact, this torch is actually the hottest item in our hot shop at 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which is over double the heat of our molten glass. And then this bead is being carried over to this big black box on the wall called the annealer. And this annealer is going to slowly cool this glass down at least overnight so it doesn't break due to thermal shock. And for those of you who missed it earlier, the way that we get our color in this glass is through something called cane, which are little sticks of colored glass. And I have a short video that can show that to you guys. Can I have that cane pulling video, please? So to start off, they take a large amount of color and they gather multiple layers of clear around this color, as you can see on the end of this pipe. And then they form it into a cylinder and attach a secondary pipe to the other side of this glass. And then they can stretch this glass across the entirety of the front of our hot shop. And you'll notice in this video they have these wooden ladders laid out on the floor underneath where they're stretching this glass. This is to prevent the glass from cracking due to thermal shock if it were to touch that cold hard cement. And then they can chop these pieces of cane up into whatever size they need to roll up on the outside of a bubble. So after they've gotten some fresh hot glass on the outside of that bubble, they go ahead and roll that cane up on the outside, and then they can form it into whatever shape they need. And in this case, they created a very elongated bubble with all of these little stripes of cane going down the side. And then they created all of these little cups off of the end of this bubble, about this shape and size. And these were set aside in this big silver box here called the garage, which is keeping them nice and warm at around 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So you'll notice every now and then somebody pulls a piece of this cup out of this big silver box, and then they go ahead and heat it up in the annealer. So you'll notice Gabe had brought over a disc of hot glass, and then when they attached it to the end of this bead and pulled, it created an air pocket underneath that disc. And this blocked off that hole entirely, and this allowed them to take this piece off of its original pipe. So now they're going to be able to finish up the other side of this bead and make it nice and even with the first side. And just a reminder, if anyone has any questions, please just raise your hand and let me know. So now that they've heated up the second side of this bead, they're going ahead and evening out that opening by flaring it out. Then they're going in with a pair of shears, and they're going to cut off the extra glass that's coming from the inside of this bead. And then to finish off this second side, they're going in with a pair of jacks and a paddle and creating a nice 90-degree angle by pressing two tools at the same time. And that's kind of forcing the glass into a corner and creating a really nice sharp edge. And then once more, to knock this bead off, Ben is going in with a small butter knife, and he's tapping at the connection point between that clear glass on the pipe and the bead itself. And this is creating all these little fractures and cracks in that connection. And it breaks exactly where they want it to. And then they go in with this hot torch, which, fun fact, is at 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which is our hottest item in the hot shop. And they're going ahead and they're getting the rest of those sharp ends off of that piece. And welcome to those who just joined. Today we have our hot shop team down on the floor, and they're working on a commission to make these very large, oversized beads. So for those of you who haven't been in our hot shop before, I'm going to give a little bit of a rundown so you can understand the temperatures and where we get things from. So you can see Gabe has just gathered fresh hot glass out of this furnace here. We have two of these furnaces. They're the large tanks with the closed doors, and they hold 1,000 pounds of molten glass at 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. And when this glass is molten, it's very viscous and sticky like honey. So when we stick our pipe into the glass and turn, it sticks to the pipe and gathers up a nice ball on the end as we rotate. And from there, we can blow into this glass, and it will blow out much like a balloon, or we can use it in a solid manner called sculpting. And to make sure that our glass is staying nice and hot, we need to heat it up in our glory holes. And these are our reheating chambers, and we have multiple of them throughout the hot shop behind me. And they all run at around 2300 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a little bit hotter than that molten glass. And we have multiple of them running at the same time right now. There's not a huge difference between them. We just have multiple so that we can work on multiple parts of the same project at the same time. So you'll notice every now and then we have to trim some of our glass, or we let some of the glass drip off of our pipe. All of our clear glass can be reused and put into our furnace again. So we have like a couple of buckets sitting around that are specifically for clear glass, and we can heat those up again. But if it has even a little speck of color in it, that could taint the rest of our glass, so we have to throw that out, sadly. But when we do reuse this clear glass, we throw it in with some other clear glass that we have fresh and ready and nice and clean. And this is called charging the furnace or refilling the furnace. And I have a video that can talk about that a little bit more.
Charging the furnace is what we call filling the furnace up with glass. Glass cullet is washed clean and loaded into tubes for filling. Here at the museum, we don't use recycled bottles. Instead, we melt cullet that has been specifically designed to make blown glass art. The primary ingredient in glass is silica sand, or silicon dioxide. The other two main ingredients are soda, or sodium oxide, which lowers the melting temperature, and lime, or calcium oxide, the stabilizer. Once the cullet is loaded into the 2300 degree furnace, a rake is used to level the glass for even melting. The furnaces at the Museum of Glass hold approximately 1,000 pounds of clear molten glass and run continuously 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
So now you're going to see our hot shop team starting on something a little bit new. So Gabe is at the center bench and he's going to be starting on a clear bubble. And over on the right bench we have Nick, who has been working with a little bit of color. And this color is going to be applied to this bubble in just a bit in something called a wrap. Just W-R-A-P, wrap. So this color is going to be wrapped around the sides of this clear bubble. This is going to create thin lines of color throughout the glass. This tool that Gabe has been using at the center bench here that looks like a spoon shape is called a block. It's made out of wood, usually a fruit wood because they're a little bit harder, and it is dipped into water to resist burning. And this is just shaping up the glass before it is blown out. And then Gabe is going in with a stack of newspapers, and this is one of our only flexible tools in the hot shop. Closest thing to using our hands. So now that Gabe has the desired shape, he is going to let it cool down over here at this table. And this contraption that he has the pipe set on top of is going to slowly rotate and pull the pipe backwards, which is going to allow for a perfect, evenly spaced wrap of color. So you can see as Gabe is rotating, there's a small string of hot glass that is being applied across the bubble. And then after this bubble has been heated again, Ben went ahead and stuffed this bubble inside of a mold on the floor. And this mold has ridges going all the way from top to bottom. It's called an optic mold. And then this is going to apply ridges to the glass, as you can see. And from here, they can go ahead and twist this. Optic molds can be used to create a different design in the glass or create texture, physical texture on the outside of the glass. So you'll hear as Ben is using the jacks, you can kind of hear the rattling of the jacks hitting those grooves on the outside of the glass. So now Gabe is coming over with a disc of hot clear glass on the end of a small pipe. And as you can see, that is sealing the hole that was created on the end of this bead. And then as they pull outwards, it's creating a small air pocket. And this is going to make this attachment piece of glass easier to break off later on. So now to remove this bead from the pipe, Ben is going ahead and dipping his tweezers in water, send shock through the pipe, and it breaks exactly where they want it to. Welcome to those who just joined. Today we have our Hot Shop team down on the floor, and they are working on a commission of large-scale beads. And so this one that they're creating right now is a large, hollow, rounded bead compared to the more solid, disc-shaped ones that they were creating earlier. And then to knock this bead off of that pipe, Ben is going in with a small butter knife, and he's tapping at the connection point between that attachment glass and the bead itself. And this is causing just little fractures all around that connection. Then he sends shock through the pipe, and it breaks exactly where he wants it to. Then he's going to go in with this small handheld hot torch and just torch any leftover sharp edges remaining. Then this is going to be picked up and carried over to that big black box over on the wall called the annealer. And the annealer is going to slowly cool this glass down at least overnight so it doesn't break due to thermal shock. So at the center bench, Nick is getting started on our next bubble, while Gabe is heating up the color that's going to be wrapped around it. I'm not sure if you could see from all the way up there, but the previous one that we had these very delicate lines going all the way around that piece. And so this is how they get that pattern. They set the pipe on top of this contraption that slowly rotates and pulls the pole backwards. And then Gabe comes over with a hot bit of colored glass, lightly touches it down, and then all they have to do is rotate this pole that's holding the bubble. So now on the outside of this bubble, we have all of these thin, delicate lines of color, and then they're going to blow this out into another bead. Then after heating this bubble up, Ben is going over to an optic mold. This mold has ridges going all the way from top to bottom on the inside of it, and this is adding a texture to the glass. So as they continue to work with this glass, you'll hear the ridges rubbing against the tools that they're using and creating a washboard sound almost. And that is the texture on the outside of the glass. And welcome to those who just joined. Today we have our Hot Shop team down on the floor, and they're working on a commission piece, making all of these large scale beads. So this is the basic shape of the bead, and then they're going to work on opening both ends of this piece to create a bead with two open sides. So after knocking that end piece off of this bubble, Ben is going in with a pair of jacks and lightly opening up this hole in the end. I just want to remind everyone, if anyone ever has any questions, please just raise your hand and I'll come right over. So with this hot bit of fresh, clear glass, Gabe is going to stamp it into a disc shape. And this is going to be used to both close off the hole on the other end of this piece, and this is going to allow them to remove this piece off of its original pipe. So now that they've attached this disc, they pull out, and this creates a very small air pocket in the center of that connection point. And this allows them to break this off easier later on. And then Ben dips his tweezers in water and applies a little bit of water to that divot, connecting the piece on its original pipe. And now they can open up and mirror the first side that they created. And for those of you who might not have been in our hot shop before, I'm going to give just a little bit of a rundown so you can understand the temperatures and what's going on. So everything we do in here starts in our furnaces. Our furnaces are the large tanks with the closed doors, and we have two of them, one on the left and one on the right of the hot shop. And these hold 1,000 pounds of molten glass at 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. And when this glass is molten, it's very viscous and sticky like honey. So we stick our pipe into the glass, and when we turn, it gathers up a nice ball on the end. And from there, we can blow into it. It'll blow out much like a balloon, or we can use it in a solid manner called sculpting. And we need to make sure to keep our glass nice and hot, so that's where our glory holes come into play. And these are the open face furnaces throughout the hot shop behind me. And they all run at around 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit, so a little bit hotter than that molten glass. And they're just used for reheating. And we have multiple of them running. They don't have a huge difference between them. We just have multiple open so that we can work on multiple parts of the same project at the same time. And welcome to everyone who just joined. Today we have our hot shop team down on the floor, and they're working on a commission of these large scale beads. So at the center bench, they're finishing up one of these beads right now. It's very hollow, and on the outside it has a rigid texture, like ridges on the side. And to break this bead off of this pipe, you can see Ben is using a small butter knife to tap at the connection point, and this is causing really small cracks and fractures at that connection point, so it breaks exactly where he wants it to. So when he sends that shock through the pipe, it travels to those cracks and breaks right there. Then he's going to take this small handheld hot torch and torch up any sharp remaining connections. And a little fun fact, this hot torch is actually the hottest item in our hot shop at around 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, so over double the heat of our molten glass. And then once they have finished this bead, Ben goes ahead and picks it up and carries it over to this big black box on the wall called the annealer. And the annealer is going to very slowly cool this piece down at least overnight so it doesn't break due to thermal shock. So over on that right bench, we have Nick, who's getting started on another clear bubble. And this bubble is going to eventually turn into another bead. And at the center here, we have Gabe, who's working with a bit of color on the end of a pipe. And this is going to be wrapped around the outside of this bubble to create these perfect lines of color, much like the one that you saw on that previous bead. So this is how they're getting those very fine lines of color on the outside of their piece. This contraption that the pipe is sitting on is slowly rotating and pulling the pipe backwards, just little bit by little bit. And you can see with this little connection of this colored glass, it follows along the entirety of that bubble. So now that Ben has that bubble heated up, once more he's pressing this bubble into an optic mold. This mold has ridges all the way from the top to the bottom. It gives it a little puff of air to help push the glass into those crevices. And now the piece will have these ridges on the outside of it adding a physical texture as well as a little bit of a visual texture. And I think that this might be an interesting little bit of information to share. The color that they've used for these delicate lines throughout the glass started from something called color bar. And I have a piece of it in my hand here as a little example. But we use color bar in many different ways. And another way that we use color bar quite frequently, almost every day, is through something called a color drop or a color overlay. And I have a video that can explain that a little bit better to you. Can I have that video, please?
The color in glass comes from adding various materials to the mixture of raw ingredients called batch. Most of the colorants are compounds containing some kind of metal. For example, adding cobalt to clear glass creates a deep blue. Tin and antimony can be used to create white glass, and gold chloride can produce a rich red or pink colored glass. Colored glass is melted in furnaces, just like clear glass, and then is usually rolled into bars for storage and easy application. In order to apply color bar to a bubble, we first need to preheat the color to approximately 950 or 1000 degrees Fahrenheit in a color oven or garage. Once warm, the color is then picked up on the end of a punty rod using a little bit of clear glass as a support. The color is then heated in the 2300 degree glory hole to soften it and make it malleable, while another artist creates a small bubble of clear glass on a blowpipe. Once warm, the color is dropped over the clear bubble, and then using a variety of hand tools or the steel marver, the color is rolled back over the clear in an even layer. This process is called dropping color, or creating a color overlay. Depending on the project, that bubble is then usually gathered over with clear glass and blown into the final form. The finished product may appear to be all made from colored glass, but when viewed in cross-section, we can see that there is only a thin layer of color sandwiched between many layers of clear glass.
Putting our bubbles into molds can create a physical texture on the outside of our piece, as it has in this case, or it can be used to alter the color and patterns on the inside of that glass as well. So if you look at this piece later on, you'll see that it has altered the lines a little bit, made them a little bit more wavy, and it's also altered the physical texture of the outside by creating ridges. You might be able to hear those ridges as they use the tools on the outside of this glass. Now to create an opening for one side of the bead, Ben is going in with a pair of diamond shears, and then Nick goes ahead and hits that piece of glass, knocking it off. And this has created an opening on one end of this bead. So now to even out the opening of this hole, Ben is going in with a pair of jacks and smoothing out the inside while Nick applies pressure from the outside with a paddle. Now to open up the other side of this piece, or the other end of the bead, they need to attach a secondary pipe called a punty. And so Gabe is getting that prepared right now. He's gathering some fresh glass from our furnace. Then he creates a disc-like shape out of this fresh glass by letting it drop onto a table. Then he carries it over to the bead, and this is attached to the end of the bead, closing off the hole